The Great Divide, The Partition of 1947. 5-minute documentary script. Intro, A Land Divided. In 1947, the Indian subcontinent witnessed one of the most dramatic and painful events in modern history. After nearly 2 centuries of British rule, independence was finally approaching. But freedom came with a devastating price. The land was divided. India and Pakistan were created as separate nations, and millions of ordinary people suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of a new border. This was the partition of British India. A political decision that would change the lives of millions forever. Chapter 1, Before Partition. For centuries, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and people of many other communities had lived across the subcontinent. Cities, villages, markets, and neighborhoods were deeply interconnected. But during British rule, political and religious differences increasingly became part of the struggle for power. By the early 20th century, demands for independence were growing stronger. The Indian National Congress called for a united and independent India. Meanwhile, the All India Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, increasingly argued that Muslims needed a separate political homeland. The idea of a separate Muslim state gradually became known as the Pakistan movement. As Britain weakened after the Second World War, it became clear that its rule in India could not continue indefinitely. But the question remained, could independence happen without dividing the country? Chapter 2, The Decision. In 1947, Britain announced that it would transfer power. Lord Louis Mountbatten was appointed the last Viceroy of India and was given the difficult task of overseeing the transfer. Negotiations between political leaders became increasingly complicated. Eventually, the decision was made. British India would be divided into 2 independent countries. India and Pakistan. On August 14, 1947, Pakistan became independent. On August 15, India followed. Across the subcontinent, people celebrated freedom. Flags were raised. Crowds gathered in the streets. For millions, a new future had finally begun. But behind the celebrations, another story was unfolding. Chapter 3, The Border. One of the most shocking aspects of partition was the speed with which the new borders were created. A British lawyer named Sir Cyril Radcliffe was given the task of drawing the boundary between the 2 countries. He had never previously visited India. In just a matter of weeks, the Radcliffe line was drawn across Punjab and Bengal. The final boundaries were announced only after independence. Suddenly, villages, farms, railway lines, and even communities were divided by an invisible line on a map. People who had lived in the same region for generations discovered that they were now citizens of different countries. And millions had to make an impossible choice. Stay, or leave. Chapter 4, The Great Migration. What followed became one of the largest mass migrations in modern history. Muslims living in areas that became part of India began moving toward Pakistan. Hindus and Sikhs living in areas that became part of Pakistan began moving toward India. Families packed whatever they could carry. Some traveled by foot. Others filled overcrowded trains. Roads became crowded with refugees carrying children, food, clothing, and memories of homes they might never see again. But the migration was not peaceful. Violence erupted across Punjab, Bengal, Delhi, and other regions. Communities that had lived together for generations were torn apart. Trains carrying refugees sometimes arrived at their destinations filled with victims of violence. Thousands of families were separated. Countless homes were abandoned. The exact number of people killed remains uncertain, but historians generally estimate that hundreds of thousands died during the violence. Around 14 million or more people were displaced. For them, partition was not simply a political event. It was the loss of home. Chapter 5, A New Beginning. Despite the tragedy, millions of refugees began rebuilding their lives. Pakistan faced the enormous challenge of creating a new state. India faced the equally difficult task of integrating millions of displaced people. Refugees established new communities, businesses, schools, and families. Over time, new generations grew up in both countries. But the memories of partition remained. For many survivors, the story was not found in political speeches or official documents. It lived in family photographs, in old letters, in stories told by grandparents, in memories of houses left behind, and in one question that has echoed across generations. What would the subcontinent have looked like if partition had never happened? Conclusion, The Great Divide. The partition of 1947 created 2 independent nations, but it also created a human tragedy whose effects continue to be felt today. India and Pakistan developed their own identities, histories, and political journeys. Yet across the border, millions still share memories of the same villages, the same streets, and the same past. Partition reminds us that borders can be drawn on maps in a matter of weeks. But the human consequences of those borders can last for generations. The Great Divide was not only the division of a country. It was the division of homes, families, communities, and memories. And perhaps its greatest lesson is this. History is not only about the decisions made by leaders. It is also about the ordinary people who must live with the consequences. 1947 changed the map of South Asia forever. But its deepest story remains written in the memories of those who survived it.